you served your country, whether military or spouse? Now you are stepping into a new and unfamiliar world. We would like to show you everyone's path is different through the stories of others in the military community. Grab your favorite beverage and prepare to listen to our next transition tale. Welcome back to Transition Tales. I have a special treat for you. I have my first military spouse on this podcast, and it is going to be fan-friggin-tastic. So, yeah, we have Franchette with us, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Franchette, and I'm a military spouse of a disabled veteran for about 23 plus years. As a military spouse, I transitioned from being that to being an entrepreneur. So now I have my own company, Vet Tech Business Services.
So tell us a little bit about the transition you want to talk about today.
The transition I want to talk about today is how military spouses transition from being just a spouse to understanding who they are, their worth. So I think that's very important as a military spouse because we get kind of closed off. Everybody knows me as Master Sergeant Dyer's wife.
Right.
They don't know my first name, They don't know it's Franchette. They don't know that I have degrees and I've worked in corporate America.
Right.
They only think about if I say, well, I'm loyal and trustworthy. Oh, those are the military values. No, they're my mom and dad, that they instilled that in me when I was small.
Right.
So I think that's the hard part for military spouses is the identity crisis.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your transition, how you moved through that.
I refuse to be Sergeant Dyer's wife.
You were just stubborn. You're like, I'm not doing this.
Well, it was new to me because when we got married, my husband didn't tell me anything about the military. I thought when he proposed to me and I dropped my dream job on Friday, I got my dream job. Friday night, my husband proposed to me. So on Monday, I was letting them know, no, all these years I've been working for this HR position, I won't be taking it. And so I had to understand that part of it. But when I got to Germany, I had to learn that everything was the sponsor. Everything was a sponsor. Nothing was mine anymore. I took it upon myself to get my job myself. I went up to his base and I went past his office and I walked to the back to the decision maker and I gave him my resume. And I said, whatever position you have open, I'll take it. They looked at the resume and said, you're overqualified. I said, thank you. When I was walking out, I heard someone say, Mrs. Dyer. I was like, yes, Sergeant Dyer. He was like, why are you up here? I've come to get a job and I'll see you at home. And that's kind of how my transition worked from corporate America to being a military spouse. And, it was hard though, because I saw a lot of military spouses, they didn't want to work. And what I mean by that is they wanted more options, but they were in a different country. So those same options wasn't the same in Germany as they were in Texas.
Like what kind of options?
They refused to take a GS4 when they had a master's degree. They refused to go to the mall. Well, not necessarily the mall in Germany, but they wanted the escalators and they wanted the big malls and all those things. And they didn't transition well. A lot of them left. So their husbands was then on PCS by themselves because it was a hard transition for some. A lot of them didn't stay. A lot of them could not.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, it was for me, it wasn't hard because I started networking. I learned what I wanted, but for a lot of them, they had been there years before me and they had not worked because they refused to take anything lower than a 12 or 13. But when I learned how the system worked, I understood that in certain areas, the highest grade was a 6. It wasn't a 12 or 13 in certain areas. The highest was a GS6 in my area. And I went from a 4 to running the in-out process, which was a GS5.
Okay.
So I had to learn that.
How did you learn that process?
To be honest, that came from my mom and dad. to be very honest, my mom and dad was married for 65 plus years before they both passed away. And they taught us to, my dad lived by this slogan, go into the vineyards and work, and whatever is right, I'll pay. It's a verse in the Bible. And I learned that you can go anywhere and work, and you will get what you need to get to the next level. For me, my highest level I've ever held was a director. So whenever I go into a position, I don't go anything less than a director mentality. It could be sweeping floors, it could be a GS4, it could be a GS5. My mentality, the way that I dress, the way that I carry myself will always be at a director's level. I never lowered my standards for the position I was going in. And that was kind of hard for other military spouses. They didn't want to bend, and you have to be able to bend in the military.
Did you have some challenges while you were trying to make that transition throughout your time as a military spouse?
Yes, I had to learn to network because a lot of times it was a lady, she was a GS7, and she wanted things a certain way. And a lot of times, a lot of us that were military spouses that were working, you would hear them complain back and forth with her. So in my head, I didn't know that this was called networking. I focused on, I wanted her job and what did I need to do to get her job. And when I learned what I needed to do, I just changed up my whole spreadsheet so that the only thing she had to do was copy and paste, not move anything around. And from that, I learned to communicate. I had to transition into, she was in charge of all the admins. I had to learn how to make my road, my journey for these 9 years in Germany easy. So I started networking. I started changing the way that I thought. I started being a team player, not the team leader. You have to know when you are a chief and when you are Indians. And a lot of them didn't want to be Indians. They wanted to be the chief. I was an Indian. And so I had to learn how to network my way through. And that's what I did. I learned how to get along with others in the military community. Okay, let me make that clear. I could get along with anyone else. In the military community, that was different for me. Okay, because things I would see, you had to prove that if you wanted that to be wrong, when I know that's wrong. I wasn't used to that. Corporate America, that's wrong. Let's talk about it. So that's what I mean about transitioning from corporate to being a military spouse to thinking differently. You have to make that change. If you don't, you will get lost in the shuffle and you will have a miserable time being a military spouse overseas or even in the United States.
I know you talk about the work and employment environment of being a military spouse, but what about just the military spouse aspect of being a military spouse? I don't know if that's where you want to go, but like I'm really curious because you are so business minded. I'm like, I want to know. Like I want to know how that transition was for you.
Okay, for me, the first couple of years, because I was a newlywed as well, so I was learning to be that as well as a military spouse. And that was ups and downs with reality. I'm just being honest. It was ups and downs, but I knew I wasn't leaving my husband. You know, we had to get on one accord. So I had to learn the military side of being a military spouse. And that took a lot of responsibility. And a lot of people don't understand that you never stop being a military spouse, but whatever you do reflects your husband.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people believe that. They're like, well, that's not how it is because, you know, they're
Yes,
not.
it is.
It is. I remember that. Because I was a military spouse for a short period of time.
Yes.
Like what, 8 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did everything to try to make my spouse look fantastic
Well,
because I knew.
Yes, but like for me, my husband had a certain regiment. You know, like I didn't touch my husband in his uniform. If he saw that, he was like, she's not even supposed to be touching him. Why is he allowing her to touch him in his uniform? All hugged up. So my husband was a true soldier and I was a true military spouse. Whenever we saw each other and it was in a work environment, even though I'm so laid back, it was always Sergeant Dyer and Mrs. Dyer. Most people didn't even know we were married and we worked in the same area.
And the same last name.
Yes, they never put it together because of when they would see us eating lunch or going out. I had a couple even came up to us, an older couple said, "You two should get married." And we said, "Thank you." We were. But when people would hear us talk, it was never Franchette or boo, none of that.
Right.
Mm-mm. I was straight military spouse, and I took that responsibility with pride. And a lot of people don't understand whatever we do, it does reflect your husband. Even though he's retired now, believe me, if I got in trouble, they would say retiree, Master Sergeant Dyer, wife, blah, 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 or
I
the
used to
wife
hate
of.
that. I used to hate
And,
that. I was always known as Lou's wife, and I'm like, I have a name.
but they don't, but in the military, it's different. So
I
I had to
know.
learn that. And so I learned really quick, but the challenges were still there because you was transitioning. If you had never been a military spouse, you had to kind of learn the ins and outs. Now, I was a little rebel. I didn't do all those cliques in the military, like the military. No, I
That's what I
didn't do
was
that.
wondering. Like, how did your mentality impact your relationship with other military spouses?
I was straightforward. So when I lived in Germany, I had a lot of friends that were German, and they spoke fluent German, and I did not. And people could not understand, how can you make friends? So my friends was a variety of people, okay? Because how I was raised, we wasn't raised off of one race, okay? We had a variety of people in our lives so that we could grow. So I had to take that same mentality, but there were days when you would hear them say, well, as a military spouse, you should do this, this, and this. And if that didn't fall in line with my faith, I didn't care what rank you were. And many of them found that out real quick. From the highest ranks you can go in the Army, all the way down. No, it was a certain thing for me. I didn't follow the crowd. So
Did you
I
ever
was,
have, yeah, did you ever have conversations with your husband about that though? Like, hey, what do you think I should be doing because it's your career? Did you ever do
see,
anything like that?
no, because we were, he knew what he had to do. So that was like going to his job. You should know what your job is. I should know what my job is. And so for me, like I've heard other military spouses say, you know what, I made sure his uniform was this, or I made sure that we attended these different functions. No, I guess I was a little different. I couldn't even comprehend what they were talking about because my husband ironed his uniform himself. It was, even to this day, he has one of his uniforms in there. You can stand it up with the jacket. So we laugh about it. But for me, no, I didn't worry about his career because if he didn't know how to act at 15 years, it was nothing I could do as a military spouse to make his career better. But I knew I had to make sure I was happy and I was enjoying Germany. So I found those things that made me who I was. And that was working, having fun, meeting new people, but yet not losing myself to being a military spouse. And that part was hard for me. That little piece in itself was a struggle for me, even today.
To not lose yourself in
Yes,
trying to
yes,
be that role.
yes,
I can see that. And I think it's important. Like, I can't, you mentioned earlier, people, the spouses would leave. And I'm like,
yes.
why would you leave Germany? Like,
Because, no, because you have to think about it. Some of those ladies probably had never left their city.
right,
Some of them have never left the United States. I'm not talking about everyone, but I'm talking about some. And because I did advanced returns a lot, there's a lot of military spouses going home, and a lot of them was just that they couldn't handle Germany because, again, you as Americans, we feel that when you come to our country, you want us to learn your language. But when we go to other countries, sometimes we don't want to be in. And that's
right.
reality. That's nothing to do with the military. I'm just telling the truth.
Oh no,
And so,
absolutely. When I went to
so
Japan, I didn't enjoy it as much as looking back now, and
yes,
I'm like, wow, why did I not take the opportunity to learn Japanese and to communicate with the
exactly.
locals more?
Yes.
I couldn't leave. I was active duty, so
You wasn't going anywhere unless you want to
no, and
AWOL.
I had no desire to go to Japan either. I went because
Yeah.
of I was mill to mill, but
Yeah.
so
So yeah, a lot of
okay.
them just didn't take advantage. Like for me, the first week I got there, we got off the bus, and I promise you, from the time I walked from the bus to the hotel, it rained, sleet, hail, and snowed. And I
Oh
had all of,
no.
I was like, this is great. And I looked around, literally, I looked around, I looked at my husband, and I said, this is going to be home for us. And it was, I went on trips. I went to the, that Monday we got there, that Friday we went to Italy. A group, the guys had just got there, and then they was like, want to do a road trip? And one of the guys was from Italy. Well, why not? Let's go. So we took advantage of the experience. My daughter was born in Germany. You know, I had her with the German doctor. Everything was German. No, I made sure to take advantage of it. Her oma, her opa, German. So it was a really cool thing. And so we took full advantage of our 9 years. Even I did in transitioning. On my own, I would go to little places and get lost and struggle with the language. And then they would just laugh and speak English.
Well, it also sounds like you weren't attached at the hip to your husband either. Like you had your own
No.
identity and you
Yes.
had your own, and he was okay with that. Like I'm sure
Yes.
he didn't make a stink about it.
No, but it was still, but Christina, it was still hard because you had to remember that trying to get a job overseas, you were going up against thousands of other military spouses,
Oh yeah.
thousands of veterans. So it wasn't as easy as it, even though in the state we complain about employment, but when you're a military spouse and you're trying to get a job overseas and you got 400 other military spouses and they, some of them you don't have to interview, you can just pick a name and they call you and say, this is your job. It can get frustrating. It can
So
get very frustrating.
so let me ask you this. In an alternate reality, let's say you didn't get a job. Do you think you still would have been happy in Germany?
Yes, yes,
Why
I
is that?
would have. Because I'm so outgoing and people talk to me all the time that when I was in Germany, Christina, we would be walking down the streets and Germans would just stop and we just have conversation. They would speak English and my husband would be like, do you know them? Nope, I don't. I do it now. I can be out and someone will just stop, even with everything's going on. They'll have a full conversation with me. And when I walk away, I was like, I don't even know that person's name. Okay.
It was I've recently become like that over the last 5 years. I used to have really good RBF, so nobody would talk to me. But now I'm just really approachable. I don't know why. And I love those moments now.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like
I
it's
appreciate
like a
those.
mini, yeah, it's a mini experience in life.
It's perfect on those days when you least expect it. And for me, I'm so outgoing that even overseas and here, if I see a young lady that looks nice, I'm like, excuse me, you look so beautiful today. And I hope you have a great day. And I'll walk away because that's part of my personality. I'm not an intro or extro. I'm even. I can live with
Right.
you or I can live without you. It just depends on when I start talking to you. If I feel the vibe and I'm looking at you and analyzing you and it's not good, I'm like, okay, well, I can live without you, but I want you to have a great day anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah.
And I don't know if you know this bit of psychology, but when you show gratitude towards others, you get feel good hormones too, not just them. So it's like you
Yeah.
get a twofer.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's why I started doing it to begin with, because I was having such a hard time with depression.
Okay.
I found out that little bit of nugget of science, and then after a while, it became a habit, and it's like one of my favorite things to do. I message like CEOs and stuff on LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, this podcast you were on, you were really awesome. They're not going to read it, but I did it.
But you never know. You just never know when they'll do that. And an admin or whoever is looking at their LinkedIn, they're like, hey, this person looked at it.
Yeah, I hope I'm the random person that they click on just so they can smile.
Yes,
That's it.
let's just
I don't need
claim
anything
it.
in return.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put it out in the air. Everything that you do, they're gonna look at and get a smile from the inside.
So I'm assuming that after Germany, you guys came back to the States, or did he retire, or?
No, we came back to the United States, and that's where the transition really hit me.
Oh, I want to hear this. Let's hear this story.
My husband always say that I don't do gray well. I don't do gray at all. And he's correct. What I thought what I was doing gray was not gray at all. I remember I went to USAA and I was working there as a temp. And I actually interviewed, and one of the people wrote, "She doesn't do gray at all." And all this, I was literally, no, I was hurt. You tell me what, I'm not literally hurt. And you won't, I meant like hurt, like to the core of like, what does she mean by that?
Yeah, what does that even mean?
But then my husband would give examples and say, okay, what would you do in this scenario? And when I would say it, he was like, that's not gray. That's straight to the point. I was like, really? I said, all these years? Are you kidding me? So I can be honest, I don't do gray. I don't. So you were the first one. I'm maybe the second. I'm admitting that too.
Well, now you're admitting it to all my followers too.
Okay, everybody out there, I don't do gray. Sorry.
I know, but once you realize it and you're upfront about it, they get to make a choice. Do we want somebody that's going to be, this is it. This is what it is.
That's funny. I was working for a company, and I have nails. And back in the day.
Is that what's on your hands?
Yeah. The nails that are extremely long, that people think that because I got long nails, I don't do work.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
I was working for a company, and a lady passed by and told my boss, she doesn't work. Every time I see her, she's just pecking. And I was doing like numbers, right? But every time she would come by, she was correct. I was just pecking. But I was working for one of the number one insurance companies in the United States, a Fortune 500 company. And I was working for one of the top salesmen. And I'll never forget it. My boss told them to fire me while he was gone. I was not supposed to be there. When he got back, I was there. And so he called in the head guy. And I remember, never forget him, John Slater. I can say his name because John has backed me through the years. He told him, if you fire her, you fire me. And I'll take the responsibility of her. And I remember I typed over 120 words. I don't know why she thought.
And that's the other thing, like you get a glimpse of what I'm doing. Why do you think I'm not working and when I deliver every single time?
But that's the same as what people think of military spouses. Okay. And a good example of that is companies will say all day long, we hire military spouses, but when we send our resume in and you see the gaps and we kind of even put up their military spouse, ding, 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 that's a key word, military spouse, we're going to have gaps. They'll tell you, oh, well, you have gaps. But you say you hire military spouses. So either you don't know about military spouses, so get a military spouse to be a recruiter so they can understand that we will have gaps. And you want us to put, well, I stayed at home or I did such and such when we didn't do it. So if we do that, then it's okay. So I think sometimes for us transitioning again.
Well, then they're not in the gray either.
Well, I don't do gray, so they don't do gray. But I think for me, I analyze companies. I do a lot of research on companies here in Texas, anywhere. When you say you hire military spouses and you hire military, but you can't speak their terminology. So have someone in there that can translate for you. Have someone, because what if my resume or whatever isn't right? I'm a military spouse. I've been traveling all these years. I've been focusing on some military spouses, helping my husband to excel. So that was my job. You know what I mean? Right. And then you have others that did the same thing, but had some other things on their plate.
They don't take into consideration that, okay, maybe I was a GS9 for this amount of time, and then I worked at the mall for this amount of time, and then I was a GS7, and they see that, and they're like, why did you have that weird, up and down thing? And they don't understand that that's dedication. That's dedication to being an employed
100%.
person.
But
and
at
they
the
don't
same
look at that.
time, it depends on the location. Maybe they don't have a base. They don't have any GS jobs, so you have to work at the
Exactly.
mall.
That's what I'm saying.
But if you're not a big picture thinker, it's how you think. And again, I know recruiters and HR journalists, all these individuals, they look at a resume for 6 seconds or 6 minutes, whatever. I've never done that. Working for one of the number one staffing companies in the world, we didn't do that. We never did that. We took our time, and I could do 400 or 500 resumes a day, and I could say, yes, we could use them. No, we cannot. Give these resumes to this other section that deals with this skill set. And I think when we start saying the 6 minutes, 6 seconds, and all this stuff on Instagram, Google, and all these other things, recruiters have to step back a minute, because you have to remember it's real people in front of you. And somebody took out time and read your resume. I guarantee you they didn't take 6 seconds. They looked at it.
Yeah, I
You know
think
what I mean?
nowadays
And
too.
that's me. But
Well, I
that's
think
just me,
nowadays,
you know?
nowadays too, though, with it being electronic, it's like I almost think they forget there's a person behind that resume. It's not like you're dropping your resume off and you see
Yeah,
somebody.
correct.
So, but let's back up to you were talking about you were a temp at USAA, your transition in the States. I want to hear this.
Well, once I did that, I stayed with USAA as a temp. I had to find temp jobs because my culture shock was different. I did straight 9 years in Germany. I did not return to the United States. So everything was a culture shock for my whole family. My daughter, everything was a culture shock because my daughter went to German kindergarten, all these different things. So when we came back to the States, it was harder for me to transition in the States than it was for me to transition overseas. And it was because I had to reevaluate people and how they spoke to you, how they talked to you, all these different things. So I actually paid a lot of money and went to a business coach because I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed any things in the United States, because I had been gone for 9 years straight. Didn't come back. I came back once my daughter was 6 months old, and I stayed at my mom and dad's house just so they could see her, okay? And then I went straight back. I wasn't out anything. So my culture was still Germany. A lot of it is still German today. I've raised her a certain way. You know, we think a little bit different because we have family members. But when I came back to the States, we went to South Carolina. And my husband thought by moving there, that was a great experience for me. It would be good for me, and I would have the opportunities. I struggled there. I struggled really bad because I tried the government system, and I walked into the, you know me, I'm so bold. I walked
I
into the
know.
CPAC, and the lady was actually catering, so I had to sit down and do my own PPP. But since I worked for CPAC overseas, I knew the system, so I just put my own stuff in because she was busy doing everything else.
And that's spouse's preference, right? PPP.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what was cool about it was I saw a position out there, management analyst. I had downsized the only finance battalion in Europe, which was 266 Finance Battalion. I come to the States, manpower right there. The job, everything I've done. I look at who can apply for it, and not one job have military spouse.
What?
Everybody else, but no military spouses. Not one of them. At least the ones that I applied for. So I was like, okay. So I went and talked to them, and they gave me the runaround to the point they told me to lower my standards, and then I was done.
Yeah, because
So,
GS spouses should only be like a GS5, like secretary, right? The
well,
spouses,
yeah, I guess for them, but I had too much education. I was like, and let me tell you, I started at a 4. So I had no problem in starting and working my way up because I had a goal. You know what I mean? And military spouses, you need to have a goal when you're out here looking for jobs. Please have a goal. If not, you will be people be telling you don't do great well at all. But no, so then, I moved from there to working as a temp with USAA. I left USAA because they weren't hiring at the time permanent positions, and I needed something of my own. as a temp, you can be let go at any time.
Oh yeah, I've done it.
So for me, I wanted to kind of have more substance, and so my husband also was getting ready to retire. So for me, I left there. I was on LinkedIn doing something, and I emailed this guy my resume. He calls me up, come in and meet with him. Everything is on. I walk in, everything. I sit in front of him. He said, I have no job for you, but your name was so unique. I wanted to meet you. Don't laugh. So this is where military spouses, you hold it professionally together. So you have to make sure everything is in place. I was like, thank you so much. And I knew about the come. I said, but thank you so much for taking out the time to even meet with me, because I know that you all do da 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 and blah blah blah. He said, no, thank you for coming in. I know this person. Reach out to them and tell them that you know me. After about an hour, I said, okay, fine. I reached out to the person. It was a temp service, but I reached out to them and they asked me about Rackspace. They said, you know anything about Rackspace? Nope, never heard of them. So then I went and did my research, and the guy said, well, something may come through, but just keep calling me back. Military spouses follow up when people ask you to call them back, even if they say call you back in 6 months. Don't wait to 6 months. Email, text, phone call, do whatever you need to do, because you don't know the opportunity.
Right.
Around December comes, I get an interview with Rackspace. Now remember, Rackspace, you can't even get interviews with Rackspace. They get 5,000 resumes a day.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so as a temp.
So by now you've moved to San Antonio then, right?
Yes, so I'm in San Antonio. So I've already got my little interview, but I'm coming on as a temp in December. Well, I'm going to dress professional, stockings, pumps, dress. As I'm sitting in the lobby, I see 4 or 5 people with wrinkled t-shirts and some wrinkled flip-flops and shorts. So I'm sitting there thinking they must be waiting on family members. And I see somebody coming. I said, but they got on blue jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. So you got to, no, that's the boss of them. And they're coming to work. That is the attire, right? Didn't know that. So as I'm walking through and my boss comes out and see me and we walk through, everybody's like, you knew, aren't you? I'm like, what do you think? It's the stockings, the pumps, and the dress that's throwing off everything. Again, military spouses, blend in. You have to be a team player. Now, my team knew me and knew I didn't dress like that, but I would dress with them, okay? So I would dress up and they was like, yeah, that's Frankie. That's when they would call me Frankie. I was like, yeah, that's how I'm dressing. But also I learned the culture as well. And that's important. You have to be able to fit in as well. But the transition was still hard for me at every job, Christina, because I had to learn the culture. Rackspace was easy because I took the initiative to let them know. And again, military spouses, if you like a job, tell the boss. Don't wait around. Me, after day 2 or 3, I was like, let me have a meeting. So I told her about my meeting. Months passed by. They had extended my contract. I'm in a meeting with them one day. I think it was in March. I'm in a meeting with them, and Tina was my boss. She says to me, she turns to me and say, oh, yeah, Frankie, your in processing is next month on the 14th, and welcome aboard. And went right back into the meeting. And I'm sitting there like, what? Did I just get hired? You have to speak up if you like a job. If you want a career path, do it. Don't wait 4 or 5 weeks. I don't even think I waited a week. And so that was my transition for me. When I worked at Rackspace, probably I had a really great time there. The atmosphere was great. And then I moved. I moved from Rackspace to working at UIW as a registrar, an auditor, but I was the adult education registrar. And that job, you're the devil there, because you tell everybody who will graduate and who will not be graduating. That's the power I had on that. And that's what, that was it. But
that does not suit your personality.
Oh, yes, it did.
Did it?
Oh, yeah, because yes and no.
But you're so nice and
No, I'm not.
You're supportive of people.
I am, but when it comes to education, I'm a beast at that because some of them.
Oh, there's that no gray area again. You either meet the standards or you don't.
My husband's out. Is still a military spouse. I will always be that. So I still
You
take
wear
that
it
with
as a
pride.
badge of honor.
Yes, I do. I really do. I take that very seriously. So I never, and my daughter as well knows that at the end of the day, it's like private I tell people I have two lives. I have this regular life that is carefree, woo, yeah. And then you have that military community that for me, transitioning, it still means something. 9/11, it still means something if I hear about a service member being hurt or whatever, mental illness, all that stuff, it means something to me. And I don't have to know you. It feels something. I still feel that. So a military spouse for me, yeah, I wear it as if it's the highest medal you can get in the military. That's
Right.
how I wear military spouse for me.
And I think you wear it well, and
Thank you.
I hope you don't take what I'm about to say offensive. But you're like an elder spouse. Like you're like the one that
Thank
people
you.
can look up to, and not that you're old and you definitely look fabulous, but you're like
I think that's a
that
compliment. Thank
yeah,
you.
you're like that person that people can model themselves after.
So I think even if you're a military spouse or a veteran, you will continue to transition until the day you die. You will be transitioning in some form or fashion. So
Not just military community people
just
either.
people,
Everybody
just yes,
transitions.
all the
But I
time.
think in our community we have unique transitions, and that's why I
Yes,
really wanted to have this podcast.
yes,
Because sometimes we think we're the only one going through it because we don't communicate very well in our community.
no,
We don't only want to show them the shiny stuff. We don't want to show them what we had to do to get to where we were or where we
correct.
are. And I think that's so important. So if you could sum up what you think your biggest challenge is for you as a military spouse and all the transitions you have to make, what do you think your biggest challenge was or is?
Understanding your limits, but not putting limits on yourself.
Explain that.
I know that I can only do so much. Say, for example, I can only do so much as Franchette, but don't limit that. Have a big picture so that in that big picture, you may have where I'm limited to speaking or podcasting. That's not my strength, but I am great at mentoring and coaching. So you can limit, but don't limit yourself. Take your shortcomings and make them into something that can prosper and help others. Okay, because for me, um, one of my biggest things for me was speaking. I stuttered tremendously, and I still do to this day. But I took that limit and made it into something that was unlimited. Okay, so I told them when I would say, I was like, okay, you know what? I stutter a little bit, so just bear with me. If I repeat it twice, guess what? You're lucky. And the crowd would get into it. And so I took something that most people would be afraid of, and I made it into how I express myself when I'm talking to people.
You owned it.
Yes. So that's what I mean by, even though you can be limited, don't unlimit yourself with that limit,
Right.
for me, so that's how I've been doing this for some years of just making myself get out and speak in front of people. A podcast would not be something I would do, but it doesn't hurt me. And
Right.
I can do it. I can still talk. I'm blessed enough to be able to speak. So
Right.
yes.
So last bit of advice that you would give to military spouses.
Understand the word worth. Okay. Worth is not a number. And people like to go out there and they'll say, well, you've done this experience, so you're worth this. No, you have the skills, so they should pay you this amount. Your worth is something that you will never be able to measure up. It's more of a spiritual or a journey that you walk on. Make sure that word never be a part of your vocabulary when you are talking to a recruiter or the decision maker. Don't say, this is my worth. they'll never be able to pay you your worth.
It's your
And
value.
understand,
There's a
yeah,
difference.
yes, and understand that even though you made $100,000 in DC, in the state of Texas for this particular job, I'm only giving you 50,000. So you either apply for it because you want 50,000, or you don't apply for it.
Right.
Simple.
I agree with you. I talk to people about that a lot, about the difference between worth and value. You can't
Yes,
pay me my worth because it's
never
exponential.
can.
But you can pay me my value, or
Yeah,
you can
because my
value
values
me
are
as
my
a friend.
skills.
Right.
Yes, those are things I think that's that one thing, and be willing to change. Military spouses, be willing to
Grow.
change
It's not even
wherever you
changing, it's
go.
growing.
But they have to grow, but they have to change, because some of the ideas, they have to change that. But
Spouse.
I'm here for any military spouse who needs to talk or understand the road. And it doesn't matter if I'm Army, it doesn't change that much.
Right.
It's just you need that person to be your backbone, meaning when you get a little weak, I'm here to push you to say you can do it.
I know that you are so focused on your business ventures as an
Yes.
entrepreneur, and a small business owner, and on your family. So I really appreciate you taking the
Thank
time out to
you.
speak with me. Man, you really when I put out that call to action for military spouses, like, you were on it.
Just
Um,
because I believe in you, Christina.
Thank
I
you.
believe in the things that you do. And I want you to know from me, as a person, as a woman, has nothing to do with military. I really respect you, and I want you to continue to grow. And if it's anything I can do that's out the ordinary, like this podcast, as you see, that's no great for me, I will be there for you. Just give me a little moment to answer you. But yes, I'm so proud of you. Continue to do you, and you have the it factor as well. So
Oh,
I'm just
thank
proud of
you.
you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we're going to sign off. I hope everybody
Okay.
has a great rest of their day. Deuces.
Bye.